Canada has some of the leading scholars in the science of knowledge transfer or knowledge mobilization. So, Réjean Landry at Laval, the guy at Université de Québec-Montréal. He's on Show Council.
Jean-Louis Denis.
Yep. John Levis at McMaster, CRC. Carol Easterbrooks at University of Alberta. And Ben Levin at OISE. But these people tend to work within their discipline. So Ben Levin, who understands the education and the flow of research into policy and education, doesn't usually talk to Carol Easterbrooks, who does it in nursing.
He's back as
deputy again.
Deputy minister.
He left Manitoba, went to OISE for about half a minute before he was seconded to become deputy of education in Ontario. Was there for 2.5 years. Came back to OISE for about 6 months. He's back. So we in Canada, we've got some leading scholars in this, and we really globally are seen as leaders in their study, not necessarily the practice.
I run a website called mentalhealthpoetry.org. Okay. I was approached by, I used to work in child and youth mental health. I worked with a group here in Ottawa called YouthNet, which is a practice-based support mechanism for youth dealing with mental health issues. The concept of how to describe your issues and your problems, one of the ways that came up was arts therapy. And I had this pile of literature on my desk between arts therapy and social networking. And I said, what if you mash these two together? And mental health poetry has emerged, and where it's really taken up is in England, where there's a tradition of writing poetry as part of their curriculum. So that's an example of a particular project and it's a small example. But I'll give you another practical example related to education. So the Council of Ontario Directors of Education was one of my clients last year. The CODE is their acronym. CODE is all of the superintendents of all of the school boards in Ontario. And they're trying to deal with how do they reformulate their curriculum to teach more creativity, right? Because in the new economy, quote unquote, we don't even know what to call it, right? We're in the middle of an economic revolution. This downturn in manufacturing is just one symptom of this revolution that we're in. The school boards are trying to figure out how do they reorganize, retool their curriculum that was responding to the Industrial Revolution for the future, right? Because we're training people in elementary and secondary school for jobs that don't exist yet, right? They're going to exist maybe in 20, 25 years. So how to write, how to create, how to imagine are not normal parts of the curriculum as they're currently structured now. Right? So I worked with Sir Ken Robinson last year with CODE to help the superintendents think about how to restructure their curriculum so that they can teach and create the conditions for greater creativity. English, literature, is a core part of that. Right? What are the creative processes that lead to great literature? How do we tell good stories? How do we use the technology that's available to move those stories from one place to another? Moving something from one place to another is a form of innovation, right? Innovation is a form of value creation. Value creation is actually how you produce money in the marketplace that pays the tax dollars that pays for the services that include water and roads, right? Again, part of that system. So the challenge is, one of the challenges that most people run into is that tension between the creating, right, the come up with new ideas, and maintaining what currently exists. And what I did as a consultant, as a practical job, is that I worked with them for the entire year to help their superintendents think about systems, to be explicit about their mental models, to see what their barriers and limitations were, to engage in understanding emergence as a management principle, right? Of what were all of those kind of pieces were there. So I'm trying to, as an example, I'm trying to link to your particular question. There is a level of abstractness, right? Because there's a philosophy associated to this, right? One of the aspects of the philosophy is that sharing is the new selfish. Think about that, right? I share something once electronically, I get 1,000 replies for free. Intellectual capital, I don't have to pay for it, they give it to me. So who's benefiting more? I'm benefiting more, but I've only shared once. But I've shared once appropriately into the right channels.
Now, so yes, but let me say, don't be afraid of this, because not everyone who receives an NSERC Discovery Grant is expected to produce a patent.
Right.
So not everyone who has a Shirk Standard Research Grant must engage in knowledge mobilization. It's a system that exists at York and other institutions, and is there to support it where it's right for the research, it's right for the researcher, and it's right for the partner.
Yeah.
So not all scholarship must be mobilized, but much of scholarship can be.
Yeah.
And so we're here to create the capacity to support that where it is happening, to celebrate it where it is happening, support it where it isn't, and to accept it where it's not.
There's a paper, so you're in education, right?
Yes.
So Ben Levin wrote a paper for CCL that's on the Canadian Council on Learning. So if you go to, I think it's ccl-cca.ca,
Yeah.
right?
What's the spelling?
Canadian Council, just Google Canadian Council on Learning. Ben Levin, Levin, and he wrote a paper that essentially is related to knowledge mobilization in education. That kind of maps it out as kind of a backgrounder. And I think that's actually part of the challenge is I've been doing and thinking this for close to 10 years now. And most of the work that I do is very case specific, right? So this morning I was in a conversation, I was working with the Catholic Principals Council of Ontario, which are all the Catholic school principals, talking about, the way that they structure what they do and how they access research. So the challenge from a researcher point of view is the unit of transfer is not the single study, right? That's a challenge because we have contradictory studies. You don't implement an entire policy based on one study, or it's very rare. So what is the mechanism? So what they're trying to understand is how do they develop a mechanism for systematic reviews and meta-analysis that looks at all of the studies in a particular area so that they can have greater certainty in terms of developing their own policies. There's an example. As an individual researcher, you may not have a role in that particular process other than producing the papers that enter into the systematic review, and that's fine. Right? I mean, that's the challenge. So if you want to be a researcher and you have a discipline, you have a disciplinary perspective and you want to contribute to that discipline, that's a career path. That's a normal, accepted career path, and that's fine. What you can then understand is if you want your research to have greater impact in terms of the decisions and policies, then you can participate in those mechanisms that allow for policies and programs to be developed.
And if you do it on your own, that's great. At York, there's a unit to support you if you need that. At York, we have an inventor-owned IP policy. So if you invent something, you can patent it yourself, you can commercialize it yourself, and I have an Office of Tech Transfer that doesn't need to be involved. So we have a knowledge mobilization unit that is there to support those activities. And the funding may be running out on the projects, but the manager of knowledge mobilization is now on hard salary. So the vice president's picked up his salary. So that's a huge bonus for York. So again, the capacity at York exists to support you. But if you can do it, if you're already doing it, great. That's really, really good.